For my last book report, or this is actually the first book that I read, I am reading off of my notes on Pete Walker's book on complex PTSD. It's sort of the book, it is the seminal text on CPTSD. It is, it's called Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, and it's From Surviving to Thriving. It's a therapeutic guide for people who've experienced complex trauma, childhood developmental trauma like myself, abuse, neglect, emotional deprivation, just unstable caregiving. And I believe it was Judith Herman who coined the term complex trauma and complex PTSD in 1992. But this book, he took it a lot further, and it's written. He's a therapist, and he survived complex trauma. So in that sense, it makes it different than the Judith Herman's work. And according to Pete Walker, complex PTSD is not shock trauma related. It is a chronic trauma. For me, it was like almost my entire childhood from the age of 5. And it's, persistent trauma, neglect, or abuse. And it creates very deep structural, emotional, and relational neurobiological wounds. He talks about the 4 survival responses: the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I add find into that, especially for young women with father wounds. I think that can play out, especially around with sexual energy and finding energy. Fawning and fighting are probably my top favorites. The one of the hallmarks of complex PTSD is emotional flashbacks and a very loud inner critic. I like to say that I was mostly raised by a superego, and it means that I created a number of voices externally referenced to the world that basically keep me in line, and they're loud and really horrendous voices. So these inner critics are very punitive, and they're really loud, and they basically were the substitute to having a parent. Healing from complex PTSD means reparenting yourself, and it's intense and long and hard. And I do believe that complex PTSD is something that's very overlooked and minimized in terms of what it really means to grow up in an unsafe household, to be neglected as a child, especially. The gentleman who wrote the book, Messages from Water, talks about how neglect is actually even worse than abuse in the sense that you receive no energy. And I wouldn't set them up in a hierarchy, but I think sometimes neglect is sort of seen as not as bad. And I think that's a lie. So he lays out like a whole constellation of difficulties that you might have if you've experienced this: emotional regulation, very distorted sense of self, interpersonal difficulties, dissociation and somatic symptoms. I mean, chronic illness, of course. These are not personality flaws, and they're not things that you can just change overnight. They're not things that are just challenging. They are survival adaptations, and they will take you a long time to heal from. Like I said, reparenting, emotional regulation, parts work, boundary work, sitting with the emotions of shame, of what it was like to be alone, sitting with those emotions, grieving, psychedelics. He doesn't talk about that, but he talks about this as a journey, as we all know it is, and there's no quick fix for this. His book is it's fantastic. It's a beautiful map, and I would highly recommend it.